Whoa, what's up, Colliders? Welcome back to another episode of the Collision Live. It's me, Daniel, your host, and I'm joined at the desk, as I always am, by the one ring of power to my Sauron, Mr. Samuel David Camp. What is up?
Not too much, Daniel. It's a good day or a good weekend rather, to revisit Middle Earth.
I would argue that every week is a good week to revisit Middle Earth. We'll definitely be talking about Middle Earth and the Rings of Power as kind of a mini review, but also just sort of some of the outrage and some of that.
What? Outrage?
Outrage? What are you talking about?
It must be a Tuesday.
But we're excited to have you guys join us for another episode, just to kind of look at what's going on in pop culture, the crazy, the good, the bad, the ugly, and just sort of kind of approach it from a biblical perspective. And as Christians, how do we navigate this, talk about this? So if you're joining us live, encourage you guys, jump in the comments. Let's have a conversation about several of these conversations. But I do want to touch base too we have our crew back, as always. How are you guys doing?
Doing great.
All talk at once.
They just can't contain their excitement to spend another episode with me and Sam. Last week, Joni came in with her pink hair. She was excited for her concert, her VIP tickets. What was the verdict? It was 17. Did it live up to the immense hype?
Was it worth the wait?
It's totally worth the wait. And the money. It's super great.
Yeah, I'm sure
Excellent.
those tickets weren't cheap. Hey, I lived vicariously through you and your Instagram stories. Hey, not the kind of show I would attend, but I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Steven, how are you doing? I know you're about to take off and go ride donkeys across the country.
Oh, yeah. We're doing great. We're leaving right after this. Flying over to Utah and Nevada, so
Hitting
a great week.
Bryce Canyon and
Bryce
all
Canyon,
the national parks
Zion,
out that
Grand
way.
Canyon.
Yeah, but I know you probably postponed your vacation just to be able to spend one more episode with us talking about cultural.
There was an earlier flight, but he said, no, I have obligations. I'll take the later one.
So we're glad to have you. But we do have a lot to talk about, a lot of interesting stories to get into. So why don't we jump into it with our first segment of our show? We have Cultural Conversations. So several kind of interesting controversies or just stories or things that as Christians I think we should kind of be aware of and kind of think through how to navigate it. Probably the first one that's been kind of unfolding kind of throughout the last week is not all is well at Nickelodeon, or at least not all was well throughout the last couple of years. Dan Snyder, he was a creator. He left in 2018, kind of on his own terms, although clearly other stuff was involved. The creator of iCarly, Victorious, Zoe 101, Drake and Josh, all of Sam Camp's favorite shows, at least some of those.
Yeah, I mean, it's just basically rattling off my childhood there, I guess.
Yeah, Sam, he's a Nickelodeon fan. But Snyder and just Nickelodeon's kind of being in the news lately for just a lot of icky kind of exploitation stuff going on behind the scenes with its child stars. And kind of the whole thing, what kicked this off was the iCarly. Again, I'm not familiar with the show, but the star Jeanette McCurdy published a book, I think last month. This book came out with the very provocative title, "I'm Glad My Mother Died." There's a lot to unpack with that title, but kind of the part that I think for us to get into is kind of in that book, she shares kind of her behind the scenes of working at Nickelodeon on some of these shows, only referring to Snyder as sort of the creator, and just kind of shares about how she was treated and mistreated as a young female child star, given kind of like physical touch and alcohol underage, and kind of forced to wear revealing clothing and kind of belittled. And kind of from there, that sparked kind of a sort of a movement over the last bit. Alexa Nicholas, who apparently is in Zoe 101, made news shortly after for protesting in front of the Nickelodeon headquarters. And then another star of Victorious, Danella Monet, says, "I wish things didn't have to be so sexualized," saying that many of the female cast's outfits were borderline indecent and just not age appropriate. So I don't know how much you followed of this story. It's sort of been coming out in bits and pieces, but what do you take away from this? Like, is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think like overall it is there are problems with like the child star industry, I should say, not necessarily like the child stars. And I think obviously way more can be done to protect those kids that are in those very vulnerable situations, because And I think, I think on the one hand, and we'll probably get into this some more in our main topic, but on the one hand, it's easy to look at this and be like, oh, well, I don't like that, my kids to watch that show because like I feel like they're sexualizing the children in it. And I think what happens a lot of times is you can like blame the actors or the actresses that are in the show, when in reality, like they just want to have a job. They don't want to lose their job. They're just doing what they've been told to do, and also they're kids. And so I think this is sort of very eye opening for a lot of people to see that like there may be some creeps that are working on these shows and in these studios, which is just unfortunate, but at least it's coming to light.
Yeah, because I think like it's sort of like low hanging fruit to like belittle child stars, or like make them like the butt of jokes, and like so many of them just notoriously just go wild, go off the deep end, and this is sort of easy to kind of blame them, or I guess fame goes to your head, and but I feel like stories like this, obviously the most important thing is like dealing with the actual stuff, but as far as like the sort of lesson or things from that, I think maybe just showing more grace, like I feel like that whole, especially for like a young female star in that kind of industry, like it's not a healthy.
No.
Maybe it can be, but like there's so many. There's the pressure, like the fame, and like sort of the sexualization aspect of it.
For sure,
is icky, and like just.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty gross, and I think also it's just like I don't think any person is really set up to handle fame, especially like kids. Like if you think back to when you were 14 or 15, like if you were famous, like I mean what sort of a total like train wreck would we be if we had that sort of fame at a young age? And so I think this idea that like any child actor is going to be able to skate through unscathed is just sort of, I think, kind of a pipe dream for a lot of people. Not to say it can't happen, but I think as Jeanette McCurdy's book talks about, that it's like highly unlikely that you're going to get through that in one piece.
Yeah, and I do think there's it is worth, like, as Christians, like reading some of these interviews and kind of hearing, because in some ways, like especially the child stars, like female stars, like are about the most powerless segment of the industry.
Yeah.
And I do think this sort of larger sort of some of the sexualization or like abuses of power, it's a good reminder to know that that's going on, and obviously hopefully we can contribute to making a difference for that. Our next story, again, if you guys are watching, let us know your thoughts on that, if you have any thing to share on that. We will have another more kind of controversial, weird story. So I thought we'd break that up with a little bit of a reprieve and just talk about the Rings of Power, because this is we're not going to let this show go by without talking about it. And we're not going to. I did do like a review of these 2 episodes on the channel. Encourage you to check it out. But we're not going to plan to do like a every episode review, because I just want to enjoy this show without having to review it. But the first 2 episodes did drop, so maybe without like spoilers or heavy spoilers, so that if you haven't seen it yet, then what are you doing with your life? But check it out. But what were your kind of thoughts on, and we will get into some of like the controversy stuff in our main topic, because there's stuff, but just as far as like the show, because I haven't actually heard your thoughts.
Yeah,
to see if we're still friends or if there's a tension.
No, I loved it, Daniel. It was my favorite show ever. No, I really liked it. I mean, it's one of those things where prequels are kind of interesting because, this is like, it takes prequel to like, I guess, a whole new age. But it's interesting because like you kind of know sort of like where this all leads. And so I think what's really critical in these types of stories is sort of like the world building and just sort of the narrative the storytelling that you can do sort of in that, knowing sort of the ultimate outcome. And so, I mean, and from that perspective, I feel like it's been really good visually. Obviously it's stunning. And I think they've built in some really good tension so far. And I mean, I'm excited to see the rest of it.
I'm glad we can still be friends. And I do think, like, the prequel thing, that it's sort of like the tension becomes like what happens to these characters and like their journey. Yeah. Because you sort of, or at least if you're a nerd like I am, you kind of know where this all leads. And if you've seen like the prologue of the movies. But again, I watched this, I got to see this early on a big theater, but I watched it again with my family, with my 2 7-year-old boys on like just our normal TV. And
Yeah, I watched
it
it on a
still
normal
looks-
TV,
it still
not
looks-
in theaters.
Yeah, not all of us can be that.
So I guess
stressed.
it was. I mean, maybe it was better in theaters. I don't know though. Like, is it really?
It definitely was pretty awesome. And hey, my older brother was texting me, asking me like lore questions. So
Yeah. Yeah, I'll probably have a few of those questions because I just actually read the sort of the, I don't know what it's called, but it's at the end of
the appendices.
the appendices, and so I kind of like, but I wasn't paying super close attention because I was listening to it and doing other stuff. I know, but so yeah, they're sort of like, well, I'm not sure like who this character is and different things like that, but we can get into that later.
Yeah, we definitely. Again, I was super excited for this show, and it has at least for 2 episodes. Hopefully, things don't go downhill, but I don't think they will because I'm super invested. What about our crew? Has either of you guys? I'm almost scared to ask. I know I'm going to be let down, disappointed. Have either of you guys had a chance to check out any of the Rings of Power yet?
Not yet. But I've heard all about it because Cameron, my brother-in-law loves it. And he made sure to watch it before he came the other day just to talk to you about it. So.
Hey, well, you
you
have
go.
a long flight ahead of you. You can watch that on the airplane, although it would be a shame to watch it on that small of a thing. Joni, I'm guessing you haven't watched it. I'm guessing you probably never will watch it and think it's dumb. Hey, well, we'll just take your silence. We'll leave that up to interpretation. But yeah, if you guys are watching, let us know what you guys think of the thought. I know there's a lot of opinions and stuff, and a lot of it like sensational, crazy, outragey. But I do think there's a lot of fun stuff to talk about, whether you like it or whether you don't like it. Kind of stripped of some of the craziness. But speaking of the craziness, kind of our next story was this being a soap opera. Like this thing is just being like a total
Giant flaming dumpster
yeah,
fire.
like, it's just like a train wreck. You can't look away, and like things just keep getting worse and worse. And this is the press tour for the upcoming film Don't Worry, Darling, which is directed by Olivia Wilde, who also acts in a role and stars Harry Styles and
Florence Pugh.
and Chris Pine. So this movie, again, I actually thought that the first trailer looked kind of interesting, although obviously there's some sexual stuff, which we'll get into. But everything around this press tour, if you guys haven't followed, the train wreck has this being just drama and stars not talking, and Pugh not attending any of the press tour, and like he said, she said stuff with LaBeouf later, like last week, and just this craziness. And before we kind of get into that, probably the highlight of this whole thing, poor Chris Pine is in this film. I think he's just like as a favor, he kind of has a role, and he is stuck right into the middle of this thing, and you can just like visually see that he's dying inside. And he made a kind of went viral the other day for sort of his sitting there at the one of the press interviews, and you can just tell he's just biting his tongue. He's trying to do everything he can just to get out of there. He's even like I think yesterday there was some, and I think maybe it looked different than it was, but like a viral video where it looks like Harry Styles is like spitting on him, and he's just sort of like accepting it. Like it's just the whole thing is crazy and probably more amusing than the film. But the part I think as Christians, at least for our Collision Live, to kind of get into is some of like the interviews themselves are also kind of have become a train wreck, and kind of one of the areas that in particular has to do with like the sexual content and what's shown and why it's shown and the importance apparently of it being shown. So Olivia Wilde was given an interview about this, and she was kind of complaining about the trailers that the MPA, the Motion Picture Association, made them like edit out some of like the more like sexual stuff in the trailer, not the movie. And she was upset about that because she thought that those sexual shots, as she said, took it up another notch. And here's a quote that I think we can maybe discuss a bit. It says, "But of course, we still live in a very tyrannical society. I do think the lack of eroticism in American film is kind of new. Audiences aren't, how did I say it? Puritanical. Puritanical, thank you, there you go. As corporations think they are, and yet people get upset. I mean, people are upset with me already over this. I think it's a testament to the film. We want it to be provocative. The idea is not to make you feel safe." So you sort of have in one corner, kind of the choose your fighter. You have Olivia Wilde saying, "Hey, we need more sex in movies. We also need more, explicit sex in our trailers for people to watch who don't want to see the movie." And kind of shortly after that, Pugh, the female star in the movie, kind of came out saying, essentially frustrated that the film is getting reduced to just sex scenes. And she says the movie is bigger and better than that. It says, when it's reduced to your famous sex scenes, obviously the nature of hiring the most famous pop star in the world, you're going to have conversations, but that's not why we're in this industry. I don't know, at least for me, like reading, kind of following this story, like you have this tension between like, you have like this younger, she's 26, like female star saying, like, hey, this is a movie. It's not just like some sexual provocative thing. Like we're trying to do a story. Then you have like the director being like, nope, this is a provocative sexual thing. That's why we need to do this. So which corner do you, who's your fighter in this?
Yeah, well, I think this is one of those cases of like the story around the movie is more interesting than probably the actual movie. And, it sounds like in this case that is the case. But I just think like, yeah, it's one of those things where, you can say that it's, you're just trying to be provocative and stuff. And it's like, well, that's fine. But like, that's what you're going to reduce the movie to. And so I think I just kind of somewhat feel bad for everyone else, I guess, involved in the movie who maybe didn't think they were going into like making a movie that was just about, trying to be provocative or add more sex to Hollywood because that's what we need in this world. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's a really kind of a train wreck of a situation for them, I think. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's like they brought it on themselves, but
and again, if you're not like familiar with like the tabloids, like this story is even like more icky because like Harry Styles, who's like the male star in this movie, involved in those sex scenes, is like the boyfriend of Olivia Wilde, who's
the
directing
director,
it.
yeah.
So she's kind of wanting to get her boyfriend out there in more sex scenes with other young actresses. So the whole thing is
It's really weird. Like
it's it's gross. But I do think in some ways, like Olivia Wilde and this whole saga becomes almost like this, like not stereotype. I don't know what I'm wording. Like, it's embodiment, though,
like
of,
archetype of
of like sort of pushing this, like it's not just about like all of her interviews have been sort of like why this film is important, not like why you should see it, why it's good, but like this sort of here's what we're doing with this film. We want to push the boundaries and we want to make people more comfortable with sex, and like we need to. Even people that aren't going to the movie, like people that watch the trailers, need to see like a bunch of sexual content, and that it's sort of like society's fault that we're still so like we're all prudes and don't want to see sex.
Yeah, which I feel like I don't know, but I feel like if somebody says that, it's sort of a cop out. I don't know, like maybe that's too harsh, but it's like if you just go on and just say that like this is this film is trying to like say something or like it's important. It's like. Is it important because it is, or is it important because it's like it's not a great movie, but you need to say something to like try and like stir up, publicity for your movie? And it seems to me it's one of those like I'm saying it's important because like otherwise no one's gonna watch it. So I don't know, like it just kind of seems like when the director's going around saying how important this movie is, it's like okay, like well that's your opinion about your movie. Of course you're gonna think it's important, but it's like. I don't know that it's, that it's actually going to be that important or that, appreciated or received.
Yeah, and I do think because our main topic, we're going to kind of get into maybe somewhat of the counterpoint of like, hey, maybe not everything is like an agenda, and like how do we navigate that? But like things like this remind us like that some things certainly are an agenda.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and I think it should also just kind of, serve as a maybe a warning to people who do want to make sort of agenda-driven content or agenda-driven entertainment, is that like that is sort of going to be what it's going to be reduced to. It's like if you set out to make a movie with an agenda, it's likely going to be like that's kind of the only thing that movie is going to do is like further that agenda or not further that agenda. But it's not necessarily going to be like this is a great movie because of all these things. It's like, well, this was a movie that was trying to prove a point about whatever.
Yeah, if you're gonna make it, again, not necessarily. I don't think all agenda films or whatever are bad. I think probably every faith-based film is an agenda film. Like, you have a very evangelistic. We agree with the agenda, but like, if you're gonna do that, like, it better be a good film. Like, if all the talk is about like, why this is so important to push the boundaries and make people unsafe and like, provoke people into being more comfortable with sexuality and all that kind of stuff. Like. And apparently, from the early reviews, this film isn't great, I don't think I'll be checking this film out. But hey, let us know your guys' thoughts if you enjoyed this, the train wreck of it all. And what do you think of the Olivia Wilde's comments about sort of the sexuality, and as Christians, what can we see from that? Real quick, we don't have a ton of time to go deep into this story, but I did think it was somewhat noteworthy and also somewhat entertaining. I'm gonna butcher this guy's name. I know I shouldn't. He's been in a lot of things. Timothée Chalamet.
Chalamet, I think.
I was closer than I was with LeBouf last week, but he's like one of the rising kind of young stars. I'll admit I don't totally understand it. Like, I think he's fine. I don't have like a grudge against him. I just don't think he's necessarily a great actor. But he was just this last week kind of doing his own promo tour for his upcoming film, Bones and All, about two cannibalistic lovers who go on some road trip, some romantic thing.
Bringing great American cinema back to theaters.
Yeah, the romance of cinema. What it really needs is cannibals. So he was kind of doing the promo for this, and kind of maybe the film itself isn't very exciting because all the discussion around this is being based on like his comments, almost completely unrelated to what the film. But this is sort of his quote that's sort of been going around this last week. It says, "To be young now, to be young whenever. I can only speak to my generation, but it is to be intensely judged. I can't imagine what it is to grow up with the onslaught of social media, and it was a relief to play characters that are wrestling with the eternal dilemma, absent of the ability to go on Reddit or Twitter or Instagram or TikTok and figure out where they all fit in." And it says, "But I think it's a tough time to be alive now. I think societal collapse is in the air. It smells like it. And without being pretentious, that's why hopefully these movies matter, because the role of the artist, or so I'm told, is to shine a light on what's going on." So before we kind of get into his comments about like the social media, I did just chuckle about the fact that like societal, like our society is about on the verge of collapse.
Yeah.
But like, thankfully, we have this cannibalistic lover, a road trip movie to come and like shine light.
Unpretentiously, though.
Yeah,
Like,
unpretentiously.
not to be pretentious, but I'm glad we made this movie.
I'm not gonna call myself a hero, but if other people want to call me,
but if I am, then so be it. If the shoe fits.
So I do think that I did get a check on that. Even though I do think he, although it is very pretentious, his way, he's essentially trying to make similar comments like Olivia Wilde as far as like film can have a role and kind of shining light on stuff, and he's doing it a little bit better than she was doing. But what do you think? Like the social media stuff and like I sort of get how it's like adjacent to what the film's about. I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there's probably a lot of people kind of feeling nostalgic about like growing up in the 80s and 90s, and like that was before social media and all that, and I get that as like one who has grown up in the 80s and 90s, and I do like not envy like our kids and like kids today, just with the massive amounts of social media and just all the problems that bring. Pretentious or not, like I do think, although I don't know what social collapse smells like, and I'm not sure where he would have
musky smell.
Yeah, there's just it when you smell it. I think I don't think that he's necessarily off the mark with that. I don't think that like societal collapse is necessarily happening, but I do think if you stay online for any amount of time, that it maybe feels like that, because it's like everybody's just completely polarized and everybody's just shouting at everybody else. And like, I think if you just like live on Twitter for a day, then it probably feels like society's collapsing. But I think if you step away from that for any period of time, you realize that like people are still people, and like people are still decent. Like, everybody's still somewhat sane, like offline. Yeah,
and I'm curious too, because in some ways it's tied. Then we can move into our main topic, but I'm curious too, like, because this is some ways related to like the Tom Holland thing, whenever that was a couple weeks ago here, where he like backed off of social media. Like, it does feel like there's like a increasing amount of like sort of these younger star people speaking out, like kind of understanding that, like, and especially people that are very much like the focus in social media, like kind of speaking out against it, and like
Yeah.
And the irony is like these quotes about it is like going viral all over social media and
Yeah.
like, passed around. And so I don't know if we'll be able to back away, but it does at least feel somewhat noteworthy to kind of have some of these people. Obviously, people have been in various corners speaking the doom and gloom about social media for a while.
Yeah.
But it hits differently when you sort of have like some of these stars. But speaking of something that I expect to hit quite profoundly and deeply within my very soul, the next segment of our show, we have Host Corner.
Well, as I prepared far in advance for today's Host Corner, I do think it sort of ties in well with everything, and I have a picture here. This is of actually Zion National Park, which is where Stephen is headed. We were there, I think it was like in May of last year, and beautiful park. And my, pitch for my corner this week is to get outside. And I think it kind of ties in well with all that we've been talking about social media and sort of escaping some of the just controversies and things that happen online. I think from time to time, if you don't get outside, stop now and go be outside. Like maybe you're not going to go to Zion National Park. Maybe you're not going to go to the mountains or anything, but you can go hopefully in your backyard or to a park nearby. And I think it just is helpful on so many levels and healthy on so many levels to be outside in nature as much as possible. And if you can't do it a lot, then at least once a day, just go outside.
The problem with that though is that like the glare on my phone when you're outside, it makes it harder to read my doom scrolling Twitter.
That's true, and you know what? I think that's by design.
I did see there's some online some silly argument. I don't even know how I came across it in the interwebs I did get a chuckle. The guy's comment was just like, dude, like, go touch some grass. Like, go feel the sun. Like, get outside. And maybe the other, like, go outside, like Sam said. But also just have someone in your life that's not, like, super online. Like, because, like, my wife, like, she's online watching, like, weird cat videos and art things. But as far as, like, the, like, the political stuff or, like, all the drama around shows and, like, she's so unplugged from that. Like, and she just has no idea what's going on. And, like, it's sort of it's a good reminder that, like, hey, for most people in the world, like, they're so oblivious to all this, like, this is the worst thing ever. This is too woke. This is not woke. This is this. This is that.
And I think that, and that's the thing. It's like, I think people get so invested in what's happening online that, like, I think most people don't realize that the vast majority of the world, like, couldn't care less. Like, don't even know that these sort of struggles back and forth are happening because they're out there living their lives. And so I just think, like, it's good to just unplug every once in a while and go outside and touch some grass. Yeah,
and speaking of online drama and going deep into it, the main segment of our show, or main topic, kind of actually unintentionally maybe relates to a lot of the other things we've been talking about. Kind of at least how we titled it for this episode, Christian Guide to Escaping the Culture War. So speaking of sort of these petty, not reflective of real life internet dramas, it kind of has sparked, this is something that I've been kind of working through for a while before this instance, but the Rings of Power. And because, hey, everything in my life somehow comes back to Lord of the Rings. But in some ways, this show has become like a case study, I guess, or like the most recent sort of embodiment of this kind of drama and like sort of everything kind of sucked into this like culture war thing. So kind of the way it's been, like, the noteworthy part is with like the reviews. Like, again, I think review and all that discussion is just silly, but kind of like, the critics love this movie, but the fans hate it. And if you guys haven't followed this, like Amazon or Rotten Tomatoes had to like stop allowing reviews because like people were like mobilizing and like to kind of hate review bomb. And like, before the show even came out, like a day before, there were like thousands of 1-star reviews with like, people that had just created accounts. Like, it's this whole kind of crusade because for that segment of people, of fans, like, sort of this show is like, it's sort of a woke agenda. It has a strong kind of feminist elf hero, and it has people of color cast, and would Tolkien have done that? And just sort of all those sort of things get again, I think there's lots of people that just sincerely don't like the show, but as far as like the sort of the silly kind of drama, which is this sort of, again, it's made me kind of wonder recently. I think we kind of the culture war side of it. Like, I think as Christians, we can kind of focus on like sort of, we talk about with like, guys like Dave Chappelle, or like sort of like the war on fun, and like, these group of people, like, they can't enjoy anything. Everything has to be political now, and they can't even make a movie without making it political and culture war. But like, then you sort of see like the other side of it, where it's like we sort of can fall into the same, like, where like, this is too, it's not woke enough, or it is too woke, or like, whatever kind of terms you want to use, where it sort of seems like everything, like no one on either side, politically or religiously or whatever, can just like enjoy stuff, because like everything has to be like fodder for this culture war. Like, what do you am I online to see all that stuff?
No, I don't think so. But I think this ties in well with sort of what we've been talking about up until now. It's just that, if all you do is live on Twitter, then yes, it all just seems like everything that comes out is either like a woke agenda or like anti-woke sort of rebuttal to whatever. And those seem to be the two camps that you're allowed to make entertainment in these days. But I also, like, if you don't pay attention to that, then like you can actually enjoy stuff for like how it's made. And I don't think, again, most of these things, and Rings of Power in particular, I don't think are being made because they have like a woke agenda or an anti-woke agenda or whatever. And it's like, I think people can just get way too like wrapped up in sort of the narrative of like, this either helps my team or it doesn't help my team. And if it doesn't help my team, then I'm just gonna like pile on it, and with all of my crusading, move the needle in the direction of, like, nobody's trying to like get people to come over to their side. It's all like, I'm just gonna like dogpile on whatever I disagree with, and I think that is sort of in some ways ruining entertainment, because it's like, well, just like if that's how you feel, then just like unplug and go.
Yeah, but
don't watch anything.
It's become such like a team sport, though, of like, hey, if it's not this, then it has to be this, and like it has to have some kind of like agenda, kind of has to be political either way. And there's a quote, again, I don't know who said it. I think it's sort of like a one of those like proverbs that's been around forever, but I saw someone that was, at least to me, kind of summed it up pretty good. I said, if the only tool you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. And again, I don't know who said the original quote, but I don't know. I think there is that danger of like, because there are like the Olivia Wilde "Don't Worry, Darling" kind of press tour, like where things are an agenda. And you kind of see it with, especially with like we've talked here in our show, like children's sort of entertainment has become like such like it is a battleground in many ways for like, and even like the Nickelodeon stuff, like sexualizing and like very intentional, like because that exists, like we sort of can fall into this trap that like, therefore everything has to be some kind of agenda, and like and I think kind of the downside of that, besides just the fact that like we're not allowed to enjoy things because it has to be like everything is like political, but I think it also just sort of like mentally it kind of impacts or like takes away, reduces our ability to like just have honest conversations, or like understand people that like so almost like there's no room for just like sincere disagreement, where it's like, hey, on this issue, whether it's like a racial thing or like a sexual thing, or like, hey, we disagree, and like obviously this worldview is different, but like doesn't mean that like every female hero is like some crazy feminist agenda, although maybe some are, but like
I think not every female hero is like Captain Marvel, I guess, because I think that's sort of her archetype. But I mean, I think the other thing too is like there's a whole like cottage industry of sort of doing this thing of like either being for or against something, and so it's like you've got like what is it, Wokistan and Magistan or whatever you want to name these. So it's like people in both of those camps are making tons of money by being against the other, and so it's like anything that can come out and just be a sensational headline, like you're going to do well. And so I think people are also like realizing that, who are online. It's like, well, I don't really have to like contribute anything. I can just sort of draw this parallel and show why this is so awful and heinous, and make a living at it.
Because there is like there's an addictive quality to like anger, and like which of course we've found in many things like politics and just life in general. But I feel like that's definitely fed into like. There's even like for the Rings of Power. Again, I know I'm a super Tolkien fan. Like a lot of like the people like me have issues with this show because it's like, well, in the lore, Tolkien, Tolkien famously just hated any adaptations. Like he probably wouldn't have green lighted any kind of thing for this. Like I get like there is like kind of sincere disagreements, and if you don't like the show, if you're like a Joni, then don't like the show. That's no problem about it. But it is like even like on like social media, like it's a whole industry of like just clearly nonsensical like high, headlines that are like factually not true, and the critics just tear it apart, and like even though the critic ratings are like at like in the mid 80%, and like but like these things get like millions of views like because there's like kind of bankable like to be against something. And like, a couple a scripture verse that kind of I've been thinking about kind of been related to this. James 1 verse 20 says, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. And again, I think this is a verse that like for Christians, like this is a good one to be reminded of. That sort of this, we do live in a culture that is very like reactive towards anything from either side politically or however you engage with culture. But like as Christians, like it's sort of like we are called to. That doesn't mean you can't be angry about things, right? You can't dislike, that they're putting sexual stuff in like children's entertainment. Like it doesn't mean like you can't, be involved and like try and make a difference and like engage with it. It's just sort of that like posture of like everything is any show and anything that might even loosely be connected to this sort of ideology. Like we need this crusade about like like I've seen even people talking about like someone was commenting, maybe it was even one of our posts, but like I just don't support Hollywood anymore. It's like, well, like what do you mean by Hollywood? Like is like Hollywood a person? Like is Hollywood like a like we've talked about like this smoky like room of like three guys smoking playing cards? Like Hollywood's like do you not support like the creators of this show or like the actors or the people, the execs? Like Hollywood's not a thing, but it's sort of this posture of like I'm against, because it's sort of a simplification.
Again, I think everyone has kind of defaulted into shorthand for a lot of these arguments, and what happens when you do that, you just way oversimplify both sides of things, and so it's like, and again, you could look to things like Twitter and say, well, Twitter has sort of truncated our argumentation into these like 280 characters or whatever it is now, and so it's sort of eliminated our ability to like have a honest discourse about stuff, but I think that's obviously part of it, but also like how many people are reading past the headline. It's like there are good arguments out there for and against things, but it's like, are you reading those, or are you just seeing a headline and then formulating your opinion about it? And so I think all of these things kind of contribute to this sort of toxic environment online that isn't, again, I don't think is there like in real life. Because if you're talking to somebody about some controversial issue, like they're not like, necessarily going to be hating on you, because it's like when you're face to face with someone, it's way harder to like say the sort of things that you see said, on
you can't hide behind like a screen and just be the tough guy.
You're tough, keyboard
and Monty, I think this is a great comment in the chat, which says the culture war hurts genuine criticism. I'm either pressured to like the female hero because I don't want to seem sexist, or I'm pressured to dislike her because I don't want to seem woke. The character and performances either works or it doesn't. And I do think like it's almost like this whole culture war like atmosphere has like trained us to just see things in terms of like what falls into these two groups of like political, and not just, hey, this character, it's like the Galadriel has been super controversial in like Lord of the Rings, like, but like if you like kind of know, and this again, she's different from like the lore and stuff, but like it makes sense, and like even like in the terms of the show, like like the other elves are like you have to be looking through the lens of like anti-woke kind of glasses, or like woke to only read that as like some crazy obscure thing. But I think as Christians, like we have lost the ability just to be like, hey, we don't always agree with like the world or on stuff on these issues, but like they, just as we can have like our sincere beliefs, like
Mm-hmm.
they can have them, and obviously both sides can get into like the propaganda of that.
Yeah.
Like, because I think even like the maybe even more controversial, like the LGBTQ stuff. Like, I think a lot of times, especially when it comes to like children's entertainment, that can be an agenda. And like, even Olivia Wilde with like the sexualization stuff is definitely there is an agenda to be provocative and make people less prude. But like the fact that like, every kind of gay character thing isn't necessarily an agenda. Like,
Yeah.
it might
Yeah.
just reflect a world that is pushing that lifestyle, or accepting that lifestyle, or whatever. Maybe it's made by a character, by a creator that is gay or has a like it's
Yeah.
not everything has to be like some like ulterior motives. Like some of it's just, hey, we disagree, and like we can disagree, but like, let's talk about this and like relate on that level.
Yeah, and I think it's also like when you just put on your woke or anti-woke glasses to view stuff, it's like it's also kind of a real lazy argument, I think, on the one hand as well, because it's like, well, you can like put on any lens. It's sort of like being a like what is it like critical feminist theory. Like you can go back and read books through history through this lens of feminism and like just pick apart every great novel that's ever existed. But that's sort of like that's just, to me, it just seems like a very lazy argument to just like put on your little goggles and say, oh, well, obviously this person. It's like, well, you could do that for literally like everything. Like you could, see things in such an obscure way that you could sort of draw these, just, I think, oftentimes ridiculous conclusions or references or inferences about, either wokeism or anti-wokeism. And so I just think it's also disingenuous, and I really like what Monty said about it just sort of cloudies the actual criticism and the actual like conversation about something.
Yeah, just it removes dialogue and turns everything into like it has to be fought, it has to be ammunition. Maybe to kind of close our topic, another verse that stood out to me, 2 Timothy 2:24, where he says, Paul writes, and the Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome, but must be kind to everyone, able to teach, not resentful. And again, I think that can get abused to like, are you saying Christians shouldn't stand up against sin and evil? Like, obviously not. And there's other verses that, but I think just as a general like posture and like, attitude for Christians, like, we shouldn't be known as these people that are just constantly looking for a fight and constantly us versus them, and we're against the world, and we're again like the goal is to be able to teach and like to communicate, and not just to fight our culture war kind of from our safe zone. But hey, let us know if you guys has the culture war kind of sucked the joy out of a lot of entertainment. I know I've been like trying to just tune out with like the Lord of the Rings stuff and be like, I'm fine if you don't like the show, but I don't want this show to get sucked, at least for me, into like, I know it's been sucked into the culture war like at large, but like just to be able to like enjoy stuff that I enjoy and like not care necessarily about what other people are thinking. But again, jump in the comment section, let us know what your thoughts on that. But kind of final thoughts, anything kind of going on for you this week?
No, not really as far as pop culture goes, but just looking forward to episode 3 of Rings of Power.
Yeah, Friday, not Thursday. The first 2 episodes drop Friday. Real quick, Cinnamon Lover 14, great to have you back at our live stream. Just adds to the conversation. Says, people are very quick to classify opinions into categories like sexist or racist. It would be nice to be able to state your opinion without being called racist or sexist. Again, it is. And I think even like with it's sort of like even criticizing like an actress or actor of like color falls into that same thing of like, they don't get enough opportunities and how dare you, and like, are you a racist? Like, if you have any, that's sort of like with this Obi-Wan Kenobi show, like anyone that didn't like the, whatever her name was, like Riva, anyone who didn't like that character was a racist. And it's not just like, no, I think she's fine, I just don't like the character. So again, it is just sort of a crazy world. But kind of other stuff kind of going on here at the Collision. Like I mentioned, check out our Rings of Power 2 review episode, and probably at the end of the season we'll do like a full season thing, because hey, I want to talk about Lord of the Rings again. But something else dropping, I think it's like Disney Plus Day is this Thursday, and they have a bunch of new content and things dropping, and I think like the Thor Love and Thunder hits Disney Plus that day. But Pinocchio, this thing hasn't been getting a whole lot of publicity, which probably means it's terrible, because
is Tom Hanks the puppet master?
And again, Tom Hanks is the man. I think it looks fine from the preview. I need to go back and watch the cartoon. Like the cartoons is like it's like an acid trip. Like it's like the weirdest Disney movie. So it's probably gonna be a weird movie. But again, this thing I didn't even know this thing was coming out till like a week ago.
Isn't there like another? Wasn't there like
There's
somebody else doing?
Del Toro.
Yeah, this is not that.
No, like,
Okay.
Del Toro's is his like weird, like based on like I think like the actual like story, and it's all trippy and like almost like horror. And this is more the like just live action version of the Disney one. But I will be checking this out on Thursday. We'll probably have our review out at some point on Thursday when we get that done. So hey, hopefully it's good. But other than that, crew, you guys are good. Steven's excited to head on his trip. Joni's excited to go home and not watch Rings of Power. But we want to thank you guys for joining us. Hope you'll join us again next week, every Tuesday at noon, where we sort of look at pop culture. I'm sure there'll be a bunch more stuff to talk about. But thanks for joining us, guys. Stay safe and continue to collide with your world for Christ.